As somebody who mained White Mage through all of Shadowbringers and was really looking forward to playing it more in Endwalker, but seeing a lot of concerns about it when the media tour came out and seeing what kinds of things were going to happen to it, I saw that many players weren't very happy with the state of White Mage that it's currently in, and I have to admit, after playing a lot of Sage and Scholar and Endwalker, White Mage definitely feels a little bit off in the place that it's at right now. So I wanted to take a moment and have a look at why that might be the case and share it in such a way that we can create discussions and see if anything comes about of it come 6.0.8. Welcome back to my channel, beautiful. Thank you very much for coming today. My name is Joesephyr, and today we're going to take a look at White Mage and how we solve a problem like White Mage. Before we get started, a quick disclaimer. Just because I'm talking about some of the issues that people are having with White Mage, it most certainly doesn't mean that White Mage is dead in the water, that it can't perform content, and most certainly not that you shouldn't be playing a White Mage or that you shouldn't be playing with a White Mage as your healer or telling anybody that they should be playing something different. Ultimately, player skill is going to come into play way more than what the job is going to put out, so don't tell people to play things that they aren't necessarily comfortable with, and don't feel forced to play something that you're not comfortable with just because you've seen numbers go a certain way. There's lots of people in the top percentiles of the world playing Final Fantasy XIV that have cleared all content using White Mage in the top percentile of the world even, so don't worry about it. And of course, don't forget to check out all of my social media down below if you want to come and find me over on Twitch or Discord or any of that stuff, so you can come and watch me playing Final Fantasy XIV, come and chat, chill, tell me your thoughts on White Mage and all of that good stuff. It's all in the description box down below. Over on Patreon, I do always shout out one of my patrons every time I release a video, and today that person is going to be Kieran. So a massive thank you goes out to you with Tidus on their title card. I love making the title cards for my patrons. It's honestly something I really enjoy. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to do that for you guys. And if you're interested in getting a title card, that's all in the description box below as well. But let's take a look at White Mage and what some of those problems might be. So when I talk about how to solve a problem like White Mage, first things first, we have to identify if there is in fact a problem at all. And as I said earlier, there's no reason why White Mage couldn't be being played. However, when we look at the 95th percentile of Savage Asphodelos, which is obviously the most current content that's out at the moment, White Mage is currently third out of the 4 healers in terms of damage, and it's 4th in terms of healing in terms of healers, which begs the question as to why people either aren't playing White Mage or whether it's in a place that it's just a bit strange. Now, I can think of a few reasons as to why this might be the case, and that's why I wanted to make this video. It's just, like I said, there's those detrimental factors that led me to want to make this video, and if you'd like to see this kind of analysis on other jobs as well, then do leave a comment below. So the first things I want to talk about are its off global cooldowns. Now, it gets to a point far too frequently where the only button you're really pressing is glare. Cooldowns are largely very long with White Mage. Like, Lilybell is an amazing skill, but it's 3 minutes long as opposed to Astrologian's Macrocosmos or even Sage's Panheimer, which, whilst shield and pure healers are not really directly comparable, it's safe to say that because so many players at the top end of the world are using a combination of Scholar and Sage, you kind of have to wonder why pure healers aren't getting played at all. And then, you already have a 3-minute cooldown on White Mage as well in Benediction, so to have 2 of them does kind of feel like a bit of a kick in the face. And these abilities also don't really cost MP either, which, when you take into account how much longer they take to return to being activatable than other healers do, it strains the White Mage's MP efficiency way more than it already is, and it's already pretty costly. Now, speaking of that MP management, it's probably the main reason that people are warded away from White Mage right now, because it's in a pretty poor position when compared to other healers. When you compare MP costs between the 2 pure healers, so White Mage and Astrologian, the White Mage's costs on its spells are pretty much strictly higher than that of Astrologian's, while having to rely on less tools in order to maintain their MP. You pretty much have Assise and Lucid Dreaming, and that's kind of it, so that you're ready for burst healing as and when it comes up. And because your lilies, etc. don't cost MP, you're having to rely on a mechanic that doesn't really help you, which we'll get to in a moment, as much as it should. Thin Air is another ability that helps you maintain MP, but it's been changed so that instead of having a window of time where you don't have MP costs, you have 2 charges of it, which feels unnecessary, to be honest, because it was one of those situations where, God forbid you get KO'd, it would help you get back on track quicker so that you can use your Lucid Dreaming if it was off cooldown, so that you could get back to a place where you're at full capacity again relatively quickly. Whereas now it's way harder to get back on track with Thin Air as it is, because you kind of want to not waste charges of it so that you're able to keep your MP maintained in like sort of neutral state, that you're not going to have it as available for when you're recovering from dying. Sage, for example, has multiple tools to recover MP while performing other abilities that you can do while recovering from a KO. So you can use, Rizamata, for example, to restore an Addersgall, to then use Keracol, possibly Physis as well. And then you've kind of got this layering HP regen that makes your cures hit a lot harder, and is also regenerating yours and everyone else's MP while you're at it. It just feels somewhat disjointed in the ways in which MP management is held. And while I think that, having, dying being a massive detriment to White Mage being a bad thing, you could also see it as a good thing, because it's definitely going to teach you a lesson if you fall down. But ultimately, what I mean by this is that when you've got such high MP costs on your cures, like 1500 for Cure 3, then you kind of have to wonder why the MP management isn't up to scratch like the other healers are, who seem to have to spend less. Damage-wise, White Mage is also somewhat lacking, as we saw in those charts, like in part due to what is supposed to be a positive change to White Mage and all the other healers, which is the potency increase and the cast time reduction of Glare. And this is actually more prominent because of what didn't happen, which was Afflatus Misery getting updated in Endwalker to compensate for those aforementioned glare increases. At this point in time, to use Afflatus Misery is actually a DPS loss as opposed to a DPS gain, and using Lilies is actually bad for your DPS. And the reason for this is because with 900 potency on Afflatus Misery versus 310 glares, in the time it takes to cast 4 global cooldowns, so your 3 Lilies and Afflatus Misery, you could have cast 4 glares in that time and gotten a collective potency of 1240, which is way bigger than Afflatus Misery would be. But this is sort of like seemingly presented in such a way that it's designed to put your damage back on track for you using your Lilies so that you're not losing too much damage. But this ultimately, to me at least, feels unrewarding and certainly unexciting when you're kind of feeling punished for doing your job as a healer by using the Lilies to then get to Afflatus Misery and kind of put yourself back on the wagon, as opposed to feeling, yes, I've just gotten a really nice big attack off. So looking at it as a movement tool and something that you can use as an instant cast while moving, because you can't really do an awful lot else while moving, it just feels unexciting and somewhat unrewarding. So while these are the main reasons that I feel that White Mage is in a slightly odd place right now, it is just the fact that it doesn't feel very exciting to use. It's not all doom and gloom, yeah, see what I did there, for White Mage, as there are some aspects to it that are favourable. Lilybell is really powerful, it's really good, however, it does of course rely on the White Mage taking damage in order for it to proc, so there are only certain situations that which you can use it, that rather than say Panheimer from Sage, which is party-wide and triggers for each one of those characters individually. But in the situations where Lilybell is good, then it really excels. It's a huge potency on a cure, and you can place it in such a way that it has massive range as well, so you can spread out quite nicely, and it will still work really well too. Really enjoying the combination of Aquaveil and the additional Divine Benison, because it does feel like a really quite delightful 1-2 punch of protection for your tanks if they're about to take a tank buster and they're maybe like not wanting to use a cooldown of their own. You feel like you're taking a more proactive approach, which White Mage isn't typically very well known for outside of preparing for burst healing. And Cure 3 is still an excellent tool for healing, provided that everyone's in the right position to do it, because obviously you all have to be quite clustered close together to get there, and it can be layered upon really nicely through the means of, say, Asylum, which is still a fantastic spell. You've got Temperance, you've got Plenary Indulgence, Confession, and all of that stuff, and it can be layered quite nicely, so your burst healing is still extremely efficient. And you know, the simplicity of White Mage is still really good, and it's such a nice job to kind of recommend to people who are possibly intimidated by the idea of taking on a healing role, but perhaps are like wanting to try it and want to try something a bit more simple. However, I do think the simplicity, when you've been healing for a long time, I mean, I've been healing for quite a long time now as well, it just feels like you're pressing one button a lot, more than it does for any other healing job. So, Scholar, you have a lot more going on, you have a proper rotation for your ether flows, etc. Sage, because you're pressing Eucrasia while you're doing other stuff as well, you're getting a lot more interactivity between all of these jobs, whereas with White Mage, you're kind of standing around pressing Glare a lot because you kind of feel like you're being punished for pressing anything else. Now, I'm sure that there are going to be people in the comments that are going to read me to absolutely filth by making this video in the first place. But there are some little things that I would like to see done to make White Mage feel a lot more rewarding to play than it is currently at this moment in time. And I know this is probably a big one, and some people may even say that it's too big a change, but I would love to see the Lily heals become off global cooldowns. Like I said, I'm sure many would contest that that might be too powerful, but I think having the ability to weave those heals and build up to misery while not impacting your damage in such a negative way would be highly beneficial to White Mages, as well as it also impacting the MP issue at the same time, because it not costing MP and it making the Afflatus buttons are just a lot more desirable to press and not impacting your damage so negatively that you can't just sit there and press glare all day. You know, alternatively, you could just increase Misery's potency. Misery's potency could be increased so that it feels like it's more rewarding as a spell on its own, but I don't think that it would make the White Mage feel any more interactive, which realistically is one of the biggest problems that I personally have with it. And then the other thing I'd like to see as well is I'd love to see Lilybell's cooldown reduction reduced. I don't feel it needs to be 3 minutes. It may not even necessarily need to be 2 minutes. It could be somewhere in the middle, like maybe 150 seconds or something like that. But because you already have Benediction at 3 minutes, and because all of the other healers have such big heals, like I'll use Panheimer as a direct comparison again, even though it is a shield instead of a pure heal. That's on a smaller cooldown, and it feels like you're more able to weave that into your rotations whilst preparing for certain boss mechanics, whether it be Savage Raids or otherwise. You just feel like there's a button you kind of have to hold off on pressing until you absolutely have to, and that kind of feels like a trend within White Mage's kit, which is all well and good for one ability, like Benediction, but when you have multiple abilities doing that at the same time, you kind of feel like you're scared to press buttons, and so ultimately, again, you just kind of come back round to pressing glare a lot, and then Dia as and when it runs out, and it doesn't feel like you're being rewarded for kind of learning your own rotations and doing stuff like that, because with Lilybell, all that stuff, basically what I want to see is feeling reward for working your way up to Lilies and basically not feeling punished for pressing buttons not named glare. Now, of course, there is one thing that must be factored in when it comes to talking about Afflatus Misery's damage as opposed to glares, etc., that you could spin as a more positive thing as well, because all of the stuff that I'm saying here doesn't account for human error. You are pressing glare a lot if your party's not taking damage. Now, if you've got a perfect party that's not taking damage, fantastic, but that's very unlikely to happen. So when you take into account human error and the fact that people are going to get hit by things, you can still move while using Afflatus Rapture or Afflatus Solace, etc., which is something to be said for it because it doesn't have a cast bar. But when you're taking that damage, you are still using Afflatus Misery as a method of pulling yourself back, as I said earlier, as opposed to feeling rewarded for it. So what I would like to see is the off-global cooldowns aspect added to Afflatus Misery, or at least something added to their off-global cooldown rotation, so that they can press buttons while moving, positioning, getting to healers as and when they need to, or getting to heals as and when they need to, without just feeling pressured to do just standing in one place and pressing glare. So that's going to be all on my video for White Mage. It's going to be a fairly short one this time around because I want to kind of test the waters with this. I'm sure people will come out with their torches and pitchforks to say White Mage is fine. No, White Mage is terrible. It's beyond a place of no return, etc. People will probably come up with their torches and pitchforks for this, but I wanted to share my thoughts on White Mage and where I'd like to see it go and where I feel it could be. 6.0.8's been confirmed to have balance changes, and that's why I thought that this would be a good time to release a video of this nature, but let me know in the comments below what you think. Are you happy with the way that White Mage is right now? Do you agree with the changes that perhaps I've kind of proposed, or would you do things differently? Let me know, and let us all know, and we can have a discussion about it, whether it's here, or if you want to come and find me on Twitch and do it there. Anyways, that's going to be all for today. Thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and click that bell for notification of any future videos I might have made, and that's going to be it from me. So thank you all very much, I'll see you then. Take care.